But here's what no one is actually talking about. When someone finally examined every single episode of The Curse of Oak Island the way a machine would, stripping away the dramatic soundtrack, the slow-motion reaction shots, and the cliffhangers, one pattern kept showing up over and over again, hiding in plain sight across more than 10 years of television. Breakthroughs that quietly disappear. Evidence that never gets properly followed up. Questions the show raises but never actually answers. And when you lay it all out in sequence, cold and without the storytelling, what emerges isn't just inconsistencies. It's a pattern so persistent and so consistent that it demands a real explanation. That's exactly what this video is going to provide. A mystery 2 centuries in the making. The story starts in 1795, when a teenager named Daniel McGinnis came across a circular depression in the earth on a small island off the coast of Nova Scotia. He began digging. What he reportedly uncovered were layers of wooden logs placed at regular intervals underground. A structure that appeared deliberately engineered, as though someone had gone to extraordinary lengths to conceal something deep below the surface. One of the enduring local legends holds that a pack of fiery-eyed dogs roams the island to guard the treasure pit. There's also said to be a crow, perhaps the embodiment of some protective spirit, that watches over the money pit. That feature came to be known as the money pit, and it set off one of the longest and most expensive treasure hunts ever recorded. Over the following 2 centuries, dozens of expeditions arrived at Oak Island in search of whatever lay buried there. Not one found confirmed treasure. At least 6 people lost their lives in the process, killed by cave-ins, flooding, and collapsing shaft walls. The island claimed lives and gave back nothing. The current chapter began in 2014, when brothers Rick and Marty Lagina from Michigan acquired a controlling stake in the island and brought a camera crew along with them. Rick had been captivated by Oak Island since childhood. He once wrote a letter to Reader's Digest as a young boy after reading an article about the island, asking how he could get involved. Marty brought engineering knowledge and the financial means to fund a serious operation. Together, they became the most visible and best-funded team ever to dig on Oak Island, and the History Channel built an entire franchise around them. The island itself is real. The Lagina brothers are real people investing their own money. None of that is in dispute. What is in dispute across every expedition and every episode spanning 200 years is whether there is anything down there to find in the first place. What the show claims to have found. Across more than 200 episodes, the team has recovered the following: a Spanish Maravedi coin dated to the early 1600s, bone fragments from the swamp area confirmed by forensic analysis to contain human DNA, a lead cross that some researchers connected to the Knights Templar, traces of gold in deep drill core samples, a human tooth, pottery fragments, metal objects of various compositions pulled from different depths, stone formations in the swamp interpreted as ancient slipways or causeways, historical survey markers, and soil anomalies consistent with past disturbance. Each of these discoveries has been presented with great urgency. Expert guests, historians, archaeologists, metallurgists, and forensic anthropologists have cycled through the war room to assess what each find might mean and how it connects to the larger picture. Individually, any one of these discoveries would be interesting, but collectively, across 200 episodes, they tell a different story, because when you follow what happens to each of these finds after their initial presentation, a pattern emerges that the show's editorial choices consistently work to hide. The breakthrough that never arrives. Track every significant discovery announced on The Curse of Oak Island, then track what happens to it in the episodes that follow. The pattern repeats across every season without exception. A breakthrough is announced. Expert guests arrive. The episode ends on a cliffhanger, and then that discovery is either quietly downgraded or simply disappears from the narrative with no explanation. No debunking, no definitive follow-up, just absence, replaced by the next dramatic find, which runs through the exact same arc. This observation isn't fringe or conspiratorial. It has been documented by entertainment journalists, analyzed by academic media critics studying the show's structure, and acknowledged by longtime viewers who are themselves strong believers in the treasure theory. Even dedicated fans who genuinely think treasure exists describe what they call a one-step forward, one-step back pattern, the persistent sense that the team draws closer to a resolution every season without ever actually reaching one. The bronze sword recovered near the island during the 5th season is the clearest single example of how this cycle plays out in practice. Researcher Jovan Hutton Pulitzer promoted the idea that the sword might be Roman or pre-Columbian in origin, physical proof that someone crossed the Atlantic to North America centuries before Columbus, possibly passing through or even settling Oak Island. The historical implications, if true, would have been world-altering. Independent expert analysis pointed in the opposite direction. Metal compositional testing suggested the sword was consistent with a modern reproduction rather than an ancient artifact. There was no verified chain of custody, no documented record of where it was found, under what conditions, or who had handled it before it entered the narrative. There was no stratigraphic context to establish the object's deposition history, and no professional archaeological consensus emerged to support the claim that the sword was genuine. The episode generated significant attention and strong viewership. Since then, the sword has been mentioned only in passing. No resolution, no conclusion, no real accounting of what it actually was. That disappearance, a major claimed breakthrough, enormous on-screen drama followed by silence, is the structural template the show operates on. What if the pit isn't man-made at all? Several credentialed geologists have put forward the idea that the money pit is not artificial at all. Nova Scotia's geology includes carbonate rock formations capable of producing natural sinkholes and underground cavities with no human involvement whatsoever. The layered logs that convinced Daniel McGuinness, and every treasure hunter since, that they had found evidence of deliberate construction could actually represent naturally deposited driftwood that settled into unstable coastal ground. More critically, the flooding that has defeated every excavation attempt for more than 2 centuries, long interpreted as a brilliantly engineered booby trap built by whoever buried the treasure, may simply be coastal groundwater behaving naturally in tidal terrain. If the flooding is natural, there is no engineered tunnel. If there is no tunnel, there is no vault. And what the money pit would represent is not history's greatest buried treasure, but an unusually compelling natural formation that has been misidentified for over 200 years. This hypothesis has not been scientifically eliminated. The show has addressed it by featuring experts who argue against it, but arguing against a hypothesis is not the same as disproving it. Every artifact and every soil sample that follows must be understood against that unresolved backdrop. Artifacts under the microscope. The bone fragments pulled from the swamp are among the most significant finds the team has made. Forensic analysis confirmed human DNA from multiple individuals, a genuine result from a credentialed laboratory. Forensic anthropologist Cynthia Holt described the findings as intriguing, but stopped well short of claiming they confirmed anything about a treasure burial. The dating ranges were broad, spanning several centuries. Human remains on an island with documented fatal accidents across 2 centuries of expeditions, combined with evidence of earlier indigenous and European contact with the region, do not automatically point to a pre-colonial burial program. The bones are real. What they actually prove is far less certain than the show's framing suggested. The lead cross, found in Season 6 and treated as potentially significant almost from the moment it was recovered, is the other artifact that warrants close examination. It was presented across multiple episodes with claims linking it to the Knights Templar and possibly to medieval France. The cross has a distinctive shape and apparent age. Researchers argued on screen that its visual characteristics were consistent with Templar symbolism. The episodes built considerable narrative weight around the possibility that the cross was physical evidence connecting Oak Island to one of history's most mythologized secret societies. Here is the problem. No authenticated historical documentation places the Knights Templar anywhere in North America at any point in history, under any circumstances. The Templar order was suppressed by the French crown in 1307. There is no verified account of Templar members ever reaching Nova Scotia, let alone burying anything there. The lead cross has not been definitively dated through peer-reviewed methods. It has not been traced to a specific origin with academic consensus. Provenance, knowing exactly where and how something was deposited in the ground, is what transforms an artifact from a curiosity into actual evidence. On the lead cross, as with nearly every other significant Oak Island find, provenance is entirely unknown. The gold traces detected in deep drill core samples were presented as potentially the most exciting discovery in the show's entire run. They are also consistent with naturally occurring mineral deposits across Nova Scotia's geological profile, a region with a well-documented history of mineral extraction. Trace amounts of gold in a drill core sample are not confirmation of a buried treasure cache. They are data points that require substantially more corroboration before they can support any conclusion about human-deposited material. The stories that were never written down. Here is the foundational problem that sits beneath the entire Oak Island legend, one the show rarely confronts directly. The most consequential events in the island's early history were never recorded at the time they occurred. The 1795 discovery was not committed to writing until decades after it reportedly happened. The earliest written accounts date from the mid-19th century. The people who were actually there did not write it down. The people who eventually wrote it down were not there. The inscribed stone is the sharpest example of this problem. According to Oak Island legend, a stone was discovered deep in the Money Pit during early excavations, bearing a coded inscription that was later translated. The most famous translation, attributed to a 19th century figure connected to the treasure hunt's promotional history, rendered the inscription as a message stating that 2 million pounds were buried 40 feet below. That translation became the bedrock of the entire treasure hypothesis. It has been repeated in every popular account of Oak Island for over a century. The stone itself no longer exists. Its current whereabouts are unknown. Modern specialists in historical cryptography and epigraphy cannot examine it. The accuracy of the translation that has driven 200 years of searching cannot be verified against the original object, because the original object is gone. The most dramatic version of the Oak Island story, the version that has fueled every expedition since the 19th century, including the one currently airing on the History Channel, rests on a translation of an object that no living person can confirm still exists. That is not a minor gap in the evidence. That is the entire foundation of the theoretical framework. The theory ecosystem. When the physical evidence proves hard to confirm, the show pivots to what might be buried there. And the range of theories treated as serious analytical possibilities tells its own story. The Curse of Oak Island has given sustained dramatic attention to theories connecting the island to the Knights Templar, to Francis Bacon supposedly hiding proof that he wrote Shakespeare's plays, and to pirate treasure linked to Captain William Kidd. These theories share a common evidentiary profile: compelling, largely unfalsifiable, and unsupported by credible historical documentation. The problem lies in the presentation. When theories that professional historians regard as unsupported are given the same dramatic treatment, the same expert panels, the same war room deliberations, as findings from credentialed forensic laboratories, a general audience has no way to distinguish between what has actually been demonstrated and what has simply been imagined. That is what media critics mean by pseudo-history, not outright fabrication, but a format that steadily erodes the distinction between evidence and speculation until the line between them disappears entirely. The online divide. The debate around Oak Island has expanded well beyond the show itself and has become a documented cultural phenomenon, playing out continuously across Reddit threads, dedicated YouTube channels, fan wikis, and podcast series that dissect individual episodes in forensic detail. The skeptic community has tracked the cliffhanger cycle with precision, documenting the recurring structure of escalation, near breakthrough, deflation, and reset that runs through every season. They have compiled records of specific breakthrough moments that were quietly retired from the narrative without explanation. They have counted the episodes and done the math on the ratio of dramatic claims to confirmed results. Some within that community use the word scam. That framing is almost certainly too strong and legally imprecise. The Lagina brothers are spending their own money on a search they appear to genuinely believe in, and there is no established evidence that they are deliberately deceiving anyone. But the underlying critique embedded in that word is legitimate. A mystery is being commercially sustained at a scale that has significantly outpaced the evidentiary record supporting it. That is a documented pattern, observable across more than a decade of programming. Dismissing it as mere cynicism does not make it go away. Follow the incentives. The show cannot end while the mystery remains unresolved. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is a contractual reality. The Curse of Oak Island is one of the highest-rated programs in History Channel history. Oak Island has become a tourism destination specifically because the show exists. The network, the production company, and the broader franchise all have a direct financial stake in keeping the mystery alive. A definitively resolved mystery ends the show. Confirmed treasure means a finale, one climactic episode that closes the narrative and cuts off the revenue stream. The absence of treasure, conclusively established, means cancellation. Viewers do not tune in week after week for a proven myth, but a mystery perpetually hovering on the edge of resolution, always tantalizingly close to a breakthrough that keeps retreating just far enough to require one more season, can sustain production indefinitely. This is not an accusation of deliberate deception directed at any individual. It is a description of how structural incentives operate at the level of a television format. They do not require anyone to make a conscious decision to mislead. They simply reward certain editorial choices, building toward breakthroughs, downplaying resolution, quietly retiring inconvenient conclusions, and penalize others. Across more than 200 episodes, those rewards and penalties have shaped exactly the pattern the data reveals. Seeing it like an algorithm. Feed every episode of The Curse of Oak Island into a system with no emotional investment, no response to the music, the drama, or the sincerity, and ask it to evaluate only the data. What does it find? It finds a narrative loop that repeats with measurable consistency. Promising lead is identified. Tension builds toward a breakthrough. A complication interrupts at the peak of excitement. The story resets to baseline, and the loop begins again with the next promising lead. It finds that the ratio of dramatic claims to verified conclusions, aggregated across the show's full run, is extremely low. It finds that when expert consensus is assessed across the show's entire history, not just the experts selected to appear on screen, who tend to be chosen for their enthusiasm about the treasure hypothesis, but the broader community of credentialed professionals in archaeology, geology, and documentary history, that consensus skews strongly toward skepticism. It finds that the bronze sword was most likely a reproduction, that the lead cross has no confirmed provenance, that the inscribed stone's translation cannot be checked against the object it claims to interpret, and that the flood tunnel system has a plausible natural geological explanation that science has not eliminated. But it also finds genuine anomalies, human DNA in the swamp from multiple individuals, artifacts that could not have arrived on the island without human activity, a pattern of historical engagement that existing records do not fully explain. These anomalies are real. They are simply not what the show presents them as being. What the data actually shows is something more nuanced and more difficult than either pure belief or pure skepticism. That after more than 200 episodes, the show has generated enormous enthusiasm and very little verified knowledge, and that the structural incentives surrounding its production are not designed to change that ratio. What the evidence actually shows. Here is the record as it actually stands, separated from how it is framed on television. What is confirmed? Oak Island is a real island with documented human activity stretching back centuries. Artifacts, coins, ceramics, bone fragments, metal objects, have been recovered across various phases of exploration. The money pit has been extensively excavated by numerous groups over more than 200 years. What is not confirmed? That any treasure exists. That the money pit is man-made rather than a natural geological feature. That any of the recovered artifacts are connected to a deliberate pre-colonial burial. That the flood tunnel system is artificial. That the inscribed stone's most dramatic translation was accurate, or that the stone itself still exists. The gap between what is confirmed and what is claimed is not a small one. The deeper mystery. The Lagina brothers have deployed ground-penetrating radar, commissioned forensic analyses at credentialed laboratories, drilled thousands of feet of core samples, and brought in geologists, archaeologists, historians, and metallurgists. They have spent tens of millions of dollars with what appears to be genuine conviction. And still nothing is confirmed. The durability of the mystery itself, its ability to resist resolution across more than 200 years and every advance in technology and methodology, is the phenomenon that most demands explanation. There are 3 possible explanations, and only 3. The first, treasure genuinely exists and has simply not yet been reached, protected by engineering or geology or some combination that continues to defeat every extraction attempt. The second, treasure once existed but was quietly recovered by an earlier expedition without documentation, then removed, dispersed, and lost to the historical record. The third, There was never any treasure. The money pit is a geological formation. The artifacts are historical coincidences. The inscribed stone's translation was wrong, fabricated, or lost along with the stone itself, and 2 centuries of searching have been built on a foundational misidentification that no one involved had sufficient incentive to correct. The real mystery of Oak Island might not be what lies buried beneath the surface. It might be the simpler, harder question the data keeps returning to: why has every technological advance across 2 centuries, from hand shovels to industrial drill rigs to satellite imaging to ground-penetrating radar, produced the same result? The same inconclusive pattern, the same absence of confirmation. 200 years, 6 lives lost, tens of millions of dollars spent. And the only thing Oak Island has produced with genuine consistency is more reasons to keep looking, and more episodes of television to document the search.